feeling comfortable with what Purview is in general. But then I mostly will be in the tool kind of poking around and stuff. Let me introduce myself very briefly. My name is Will. I am a cloud solution architect at Microsoft. So that means I work with very large customers and medium-sized customers to help them design and solve problems on the Microsoft Cloud, on Microsoft Azure. And my primary goal has over the past year has been to talk about Azure Purview. I think I have talked about Azure Purview for officially a year at this point, when the product was in private preview and before, and now I've really grown to love the tool because of, number one, just its flexibility. There's a lot of things you can do to customize Azure Purview to make it fit your needs. But secondly, also for the automation that it provides as well, so that you don't have to do a lot of work to get a lot of value out of data governance, out of finding where your data is, what's in these files, and is it something that I should be worried about? Also, of course, empowering the business users too, and making sure that they are ready to go and actually find data sets that might be otherwise locked away or only found with tribal knowledge, right? You can't, there's no ask Bing to find something in your data sets, but Purview makes that possible. So I'm also based in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I've been here for about 6 years, or maybe coming up on 7 years in Wisconsin. I used to live in Illinois. You can make fun of me for it, but I've really loved living in Wisconsin. And I used to be a member with Blake of one of the Milwaukee user groups, or big data user groups out there as well. And I really enjoyed, hanging out with the meetups. With COVID, I just haven't been doing anything along meetups. And also I have a kid, so she kind of took all the time that I would have normally had to drive to Milwaukee or drive to Madison. Enough about me. Let's talk about Purview though. So Azure Purview, I'm just going to do, again, very few slides. We're going to skip some of the kind of salesy stuff inside of here, but ultimately Purview, the whole point of Purview is to essentially get one-stop shop. And since this is going to be posted out on YouTube, I will keep it to publicly available information. But essentially, it's a one-stop shop for finding what data is out there in your data estate, in all of your databases, in all of your file stores in the cloud, in your other cloud providers as well, right? AWS and Google Cloud. We have connections into those services to say, hey, you happen to have some PII information, some personally identified information out there. Did you know? You might want to go out and investigate something like that. In addition, it has the ability to do some sort of like impact analysis as well, where you can say, if I change this column in this table, what's going to happen, right? Is it going to ultimately wreck some BI report down the line? Do I need to be aware of the entire lineage of this particular column when I go to about changing it? With Azure Purview, you're able to do that. In addition, as things continue to roll out, Azure Purview will become more and more the centerpiece of governance and even like permissions and controls within Azure itself. So if you saw at Ignite, if anyone is not familiar, Ignite is a big conference that Microsoft does to do a bunch of product announcements. But at Ignite, one of the new features of Azure Purview is the permission controls on Azure Blob Storage or Azure Data Lake Storage, where you can actually set and say, within Purview, I can say people who have access, who I've defined in Azure Purview, that they have access to read about the files in this particular storage container and this particular file folder. I can say, yes, you have access to go actually extract the data now, right? It's not just reading about some metadata about, hey, what files are here, what's the schema of those files. It's actually now coming to the point where we will be able to perform the access control inside of there as well. And that'll continue to grow, especially around the Azure stack or on the Microsoft stack first, but eventually also out to AWS and Google Cloud as well, to say, yeah, you can manage it all from one spot for those who need to. So that is, that's the big concepts there. I'm just gonna quickly see if there's anything else of value in these slides. Not really, but this is a nice little slide. So again, our kind of pitch line is unified data governance with Azure Purview. And so what we are taking with Azure Purview is one UI, one user experience in Microsoft's cloud where we can take data, specifically metadata, not the actual data. We're not going to scan 10 terabytes of data and make a copy of it inside of Azure Purview. We are going to read 128 rows, let's say, from your SQL servers. We're going to read the metadata about your Power BI data sets. We're going to read your Oracle tables, just again, the tiny little snippet of it, and say, what's happening in here? Teradata, if you have a Teradata a database, we'll be able to read those tables and extract out from views and things like that what tables are being used as inputs and outputs to those views. So we can extract all this information of just the metadata, store it inside of Azure Purview, and make it accessible to, again, business users to find things like, what is, where can I find a table about customers? I just need to go do some queries about customers. Where can I find it? In addition, we can talk to data governance people as well. So they are folks who I need to make sure that PII or personal healthcare information or identifiable information is not leaving my network, right? For some reason, and I had a great example before with a customer where we found that there was a S3 bucket, right? They use a mixture of Azure and Amazon, but for some reason out on this S3 bucket, it turns out that there was a bunch of credit card information. What? Why is there credit card information? And so we can detect these sort of things in advance, and or I guess once they're out there, and at the interval that you choose, and say, we should go do something about this. We can find these things after we've done a scan of that S3 bucket, and we can keep up with leaking potentially serious information that we don't want out there. So that is kind of the insights. Please, if there's any questions, go for it. Just feel free to interrupt.
Yep. Sorry, I know you can't see me. I see on your slide that you have arrows going both directions.
Yes.
To the things on the right.
Yeah.
And so related to what you're talking about with PI, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So we have a use case where we want to generate, flags for fields that contain PII, and that could be,
yes.
If you can find them yourself, that's great. But we could also just go label them. Mm-hmm. We'd like to label them in one place and have that label be propagated everywhere that those fields exist. So when I look in Power BI or Tableau or business objects or in the database, I can tell which fields are PII, and so I can choose, do I really want to pull this field into my view or into my dashboard or whatever? And I know, like, it's red. I know that I'm doing that if I choose to do that. Is that possible?
Today, no. But in the near future, Power BI will support that, where it'll be able to take in information from Azure Purview and say, this is what I know about this column that you're about to pull in. But today it does not support that. But that is something that has been heavily requested from other customers, and they want to be able to have that integration to pull in. For Azure Synapse Analytics, it may have more features that I just might not be aware of, but that is another candidate for having this two-way street, right? Because with Azure Synapse Analytics, it has already built an integration to browse Purview, so there's very much a tighter goal with keeping Synapse in sync with what Purview has and being able to leverage what Purview has in there as well. So I know Power BI for a fact is coming. Synapse might be something in the near future as well, but I would need to double back on that one to be sure. Does that help?
That's great. Thank you.
The other thing I just wanted to mention on there is again, we're recording, so I'll be polite. Under the hood, Azure Purview is powered by something called Apache Atlas, and Apache Atlas is an open source framework. It is a data cataloging service that has a really basic user interface, but ultimately we are leveraging the same underlying data structures and APIs to power Azure Purview. So that way we can take advantage of the open source community who loves Apache Atlas and get all that benefit plus more with Azure Purview. The reason why I bring that up is because Apache Atlas actually has that feature where if I tag it with a classification in the middle of my stream of lineage, it could actually propagate that tag across the lineage, right? It can actually say, three steps back or 3 steps forward. I could see that this, one tag in the middle of my lineage is reflected down that path. So from the UI perspective, Apache Atlas supports it, but Azure Purview has turned that off for right now. But we are continuing to make sure we are in sync with what Apache Atlas does. And I'm hoping that feature will come on board because to your point, I don't want to tag every step of the way. I want to tag it in one spot, and then the fact that it was been tagged to carry throughout the whole entire ecosystem. So yes, that's what I'll say on the recording. If any other questions, feel free to just jump in. Absolutely, please.
Sure. Follow up on that, and if we need to stop recording, we can. Do you know if any of the other competitors of yours are also using Apache Atlas as the foundation for their product?
It's a wonderful question. Okay, so again, talk about Purview for about a year now, and I've seen a lot of other solutions. As far as I know, no. There's one other open source tool called Ageria, and Ageria is a fork of Apache Atlas. So there's some bad blood apparently, or something like that, and they forked Apache Atlas and went off and did their own thing. So, but like any proprietary solution, I have not seen anyone using Apache Atlas under the hood. I don't know why, but no proprietary solution seems to be doing that at this point. Cool. Thank you for the questions. I love it. Okay, we're going to stop doing slides at this point because we can just go into the tool and see some of this stuff. So I'm going to switch over. Well, I'm going to try to switch over, and I have a very clean demo environment that is made available to Microsoft employees. But I also have a very dirty, rough environment that I have personally that we can kind of flip back and forth between if we want to see something more dynamic, or if we want to break something, we'll break it in mine and not the pretty environment. So what we're seeing here is the Purview Studio, or the Purview user interface. Inside of Purview, we have a couple key concepts, right? So number one, we have a data catalog, and that data catalog essentially is our list of things that we know about, our universe of things that we have cataloged, right? We've gone out, collected this information with Azure Purview. Some of it is automatic. You can also build some custom things as well. And that's where I mentioned the flexibility. You can always build something very specific to a data source that Azure doesn't know about, but you want to represent. We always have the ability to customize it to that source. But the data catalog, right? We have the ability to kind of navigate our way into these different sources, right? So I can I want to look at all my data lakes, right? Oh, okay, I've got this client demo, this Fabricam, a lot of Fabricam. Somebody did their own thing here. I don't really have a good one to go into, but I'll go into this one, right? And then I can start navigating my way through for Azure storage, right? If you're familiar with AWS, this is again kind of like a bucket. I can continue working my way down the file system to see, what's out here. What are the things in here? So what I've navigated to is essentially a file folder inside of my Data Lake Gen 2. And I can also take a look at some properties, right? Maybe there's some information here, like some things. Well, let's see what we got for all. Okay, if I have like modify time, if I could annotate this with a description or something like that. Probably more interesting though, I could have a schema that is automatically generated from this, right? And we'll see how we do that kind of automation in just a moment. But this has given me, all the columns that are inside of this, all the columns that are inside the Parquet files that are in this folder, right? And so this applies to Parquet, CSVs, tab delimited, Avro files, orc files, you name it, JSON files. You name it, we'll probably have be able to read that file and extract that information out. So this is kind of cool. I can see some information about here. Had any of these been something kind of sensitive, we might have classifications or sensitivity labels that popped up, right? We might say like, if we'll see some here in a moment, but this is where that PII comes in, or that PHI, right? Like license plate numbers, or driver's license numbers, or your passport, social security numbers, etc. Those would be automatically picked up and say, hey, we read some of your data, and a good chunk of it looked like social security numbers. We're going to flag it with that classification for you. When we'll see an example of that. And we also have glossary terms. We'll talk about the glossary here in just a moment, but you can always annotate your data, your metadata, with the fact that I have this field called cust ABC. Well, that really represents the customer ID, and I might want to annotate it with the fact that, hey, I'm going to give a well-defined business term to this field, and great, I will tag it with the fact that cust ABC is actually related to my customer concept. And great, when I go to actually look for a customer, that field would have a stronger chance of showing up, right? Because no one's going to look for cust ABC, but they might look for customer at that point. Okay, great. And then data type, right? Just we're extracting the data type. If apparently these are all strings, that's kind of weird. It's probably a bad example from the NYC taxi files, but no less. That is, we can browse around, right? So I can click into it and kind of just explore, right? But even better, from a business perspective, I might search for something like customer, and I get back some more interesting information, right? I get back across all my data sources. What do I have? Like, what is this customer concept in here? So inside of here, we also start seeing some of our sensitivity labels, where apparently in this customer table, it contains confidential information. And this is coming through Microsoft Information Protection, which it was also named Azure Information Protection briefly, or maybe it was a sub-brand, but this is coming from that feature built into Office 365. So if you're using Office 365, you can always extend that same set of rules you've defined up there into Azure Purview, into the data sets that it is then scanning as well. So let's and then okay, so we have classifications here. So let's click into here, and maybe this has, okay, cool, this has more interesting stuff here. So from the overview page, we can see that yes, apparently there's an Australia company number in here, but on the individual schema, on the individual columns, we picked up these other things too, right? Like there's a person's name, there's a phone number, there's a common password is not a good thing. Let's go look at that, right? So we can see in here, password hash, yikes. Okay, so this is probably a bad thing to have in your customer table, probably. But no less, what a great, I love the description. Do not pull into data lake. But great, so we can see a little bit more information here, and we can see even an example of this customer ID field has been manually annotated with the term, the glossary term customer. So as a business user, I might come in, I knew I was searching for customer, but what's this definition of a customer? Oh, okay, cool. So my business has defined this as a paid or free trial subscribers or service user, right? So maybe this example, Fabricam apparently is some sort of subscription business. I don't know what we made it today, but that's what it is today. And so cool, I can get, again, a little bit more information about this schema through the classifications, through the sensitivity labels of Microsoft Information Protection, and then through manual annotation of glossary terms. I can also do the reverse. If I want to learn, I only want to really talk about the trusted customer concept, I can go to the glossary itself, and we'll go back and we'll see the full glossary in just a moment. I can go back to the glossary, and I can then go the opposite way. I say, for this term, show me all the assets that are like this, right? So really, you can ignore this. There was a holdover from the previous search, but technically what it does is executes a search and filters on the fact that there's a glossary term and has the word customer in here, right? And so now I have everything that has been annotated with the term customer, right? So apparently all of these things are important to the customer concept, right? That customer concept being a paid or free trial subscriber or service user or something like that. So that's from the business perspective, and that lets us, again, browse through, see sort of kind of some cool stuff. I want to also show, going back to our customer search, I want to show the let's try for a Power BI example. In Power BI, let's see. Okay, well, let me try to find a data factory example then. I talked also about lineage as well, or impact analysis. So again, from a business perspective, as a business user or even a developer perspective, I might want to come in here, and I'm just going to look around here because I don't know the full demo environment. Let's see. Ooh, that's a lot in here. If we look at this, so Azure Data Factory, for those not familiar, is our ETL tool, our extract, transform, load tool that is in the cloud, right? It's essentially SQL Server integration services in the cloud in a nice, pretty UI. And so what we've done here is we've connected Purview to Azure Data Factory, and it also connects with something called Azure Data Share, which allows you to share data across tenants or across different customers. So cool, we've connected it there, and then whenever we execute that ETL job, it's going to push that lineage into Azure Purview for us, right? And so in this case, we can see that, okay, our input was this financials S3 bucket, right? Or this technically is a folder inside of some bucket. And we, in this case, we are copying that data over to the financials in Azure, right? And so this is a very simplified one, but we also support, there's something called Azure Data Flows or Azure Data Factory Data Flows, which is a more complex transform-based one where you could, be joining columns, you could be connecting different tables together, doing different transformations. Those input tables and that output table would all be represented here as well. So I'm also going to switch over to my demo environment that I play around with, just to give another example of what that lineage might look like, because I think it's really, really nifty to toy around with. So if there's any questions while this loads, feel free to shoot them out.
Can you handle parameterized Azure Data Factory queries where the parameters are passed in from like Azure pipelines or something?
Love it. Yes. Yeah. So absolutely. What will happen is you will have. Let me go back. So what it'll look like is you'll still have your data factory. You will have your copy activity, or your pipeline rather. But within here, you will have many instances of that pipeline, right? And the cool thing is that you will have, so if you go back to lineage here, it's parameterized, right? So I'm assuming the parameterization is probably on the inputs and outputs, let's say, the files that are being copied or transformed.
Yeah,
and
usually based on what environment you're in.
Beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, so that's exactly it then, right? What you'll have is, let's say the dev financials or the dev input table will appear, and its lineage, right? We can actually switch over to this asset, and we can say, okay, for the dev financials, it will have a lineage tab, and it will have that specific run of the pipeline, right? It'll have a specific run of the pipeline, and so you can always, go from the dev, QA, or the production input tables or output tables and see the lineage there, and then you'll always be able to say, oh, okay, it was this particular run of it. And I think, let me just see, I don't know if the parameters are specified in here. Let's see what else we got here. Inputs there. I'd have to double check on that one, because I think there might be while it's not here today, there will be ways to also extend this further with even more annotations as well. Like if you wanted to force in those parameters to see what were the parameters for this run, then there will be a way to do that in the near future, but it looks like it's not here today. But ultimately, your lineage will show correctly, but you might not be able to say what was the input parameters for this run that generated that data set. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for that confirmation. I wanted to show you guys I want to show you a more complex. Oh, there it was. This guy. Fingers crossed. Yeah. So I want to show you a slightly more complex, right? So, okay, so now I have two inputs, right? Oh, okay, this is kind of nice. Another feature, though, that comes out with Data Factory, if there's transformations, is this concept of column mapping, where I can get a little bit of this idea for like lineage at the column level, right? So in this case, hopefully those in the room can see it well enough, is I've got a column in each table that goes into some daily ETL process, and it spits out some destination table. And on this, I've been able to highlight the fact that this destination combo 01 field is in some way, I don't have the exact transformations, but in some way it is the product of these two other columns. And if I hover over these other ones, I can see that source 01 goes to destination 01, source 02 goes to destination 02, and then there's that combo field as well. So that's where I have this ability to, out of the box with Data Factory, I can get this kind of lineage, and then using the Apache Atlas APIs, we could feed this information into almost any other process, any other custom lineage that you guys wanted to, and we're able to represent this kind of, again, column level lineage, and it'll go beyond this input and output table, right? If I have destination combo 01 and some other process using it, then so long as I've had this column mapping set up, I can even potentially track that whole set of lineage across many different tables, many different processes as well. So one cool, neat feature of Azure Purview, both from the lineage perspective of just tables, but also column mapping as a means for keeping track of like where did this column come from? And what were its inputs as well? So again, we can identify, am I about to make a big mistake by changing this particular column or this particular table? If I do, will I break anything? And this is the means for us to tell that. Okay. So that was the business user side. That was business user stuff. And I just want to do a time check. Cool, we're doing good. 6:30 about. So let's dive into a little more about kind of the governance people, because I know there was one gentleman from the security side, so I want to make sure he walks away with some interest in this is all these folks talking about lineage. I don't care about that. Let's talk about security. Let's talk about governance. So inside of Azure Purview, we have, let me try to make this a little bit bigger so we can see something. Inside of Azure Purview, we have this ability to collect this data, right? We've seen users of this data, right? We've seen, we've gone through the business perspective of like, I just want to find out more about the customer data that I have out there. And it could have been finance data, it could have been about, whatever. But now from a governance and kind of an administrative perspective, how did we get this data in there? And what else do we get out of there? How can I take all of that classification information, all that sensitivity information, and how can I roll it up and confirm the fact that, I'm not leaking PII somewhere? So first and foremost, how do we get that data? So the number one spot is inside of Azure Purview, you can register a data source. So I'll click on this button. This is the registration experience where you have a myriad set of data sources that we support out of the box. Again, speaking of the Apache Atlas API, it is, technically infinitely flexible, right? You could create any data source that you want. You can create any kind of connection between data sources. You have a lot of power with the Apache Atlas API, but you don't get a pretty icon, right? If you have some DB2 database you want to represent in there, you can always build that. You can always build and create that kind of concept inside of Purview, but you don't get a shiny icon. If you saw in the last video you saw over here, it looks kind of lame. It's a little gear icon or a little file thingy, kind of lame, but no less, that will change eventually. For the out of the box experience though, I can go to any of these data sources that I have in, of course, Azure's cloud, but also we have a support for some Amazon sources, and then also BigQuery, and then I think Looker is also, I think Looker is Google Cloud, I believe, as well. So we have again cross-cloud support for quite a few things, and we'll continue.
Can you do on-premises stuff like with the data gateway?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at so here's the SQL Server, right? So on-prem SQL Server, check, right? You do need to install an integration runtime is what the fancy term is for nowadays. And so that's just a little piece of .NET code that's running as a little agent on a VM or something like that. And then it has permissions to connect into that server. You're good. Same with Oracle, same with, there's like Irwin, if you guys are using that. There's a handful of others that I just can't, MySQL, Postgres, all these are on-prem Teradata, Cassandra, all those as on-prem solutions, yes, absolutely. And then again, speaking of the Atlas API, you can always represent them as well, right? You can always build a custom connector. I'd love to talk to you guys about that if that were of interest. Building a custom connector to query your DB2 database, extract that metadata, and then push it to Azure Purview as well. That's always a possibility.
Cool. And the credentials for those on-premises databases, are they only on-prem, or are they stored in the cloud as well?
Great question. Yeah, so they would be stored in a key vault, right? So let me set this up in my environment so I don't break anything, but we can totally walk through it. And thank you. This is what a great segue into the experience. So let's do something crazy like an Oracle table or something like that, or an Oracle database. I don't speak Oracle very well, but I know that I can just kind of fill in some junk here. Let's just call 7071. So let's say Bob, and I'm going to put this to the root collection. Great. I'll register it. And so now I registered it in here. Which one is it? I think it's this one. Let's take a look at that one. And so I think this is the one. So that was just me registering the fact and kind of like locking in the name and the host and the server URL that I would have really put in there. When I go to do a new scan, that's when it's going to ask me for the credential information here. And so in this case, what I would need to do is I would need to hit this new creation, and then I would need to specify a key vault that I want to store this information into. And so that way it's all locked away, it's in the cloud, and Azure Purview can reach it, because what it's going to do is it's going to technically tell that integration runtime, hey, go ahead and grab this key that you have permission to grab, because you've set up the right permissions within Azure Purview. Grab this key, use this key to go execute a query or a set of queries on top of that Oracle database. And it's all happening inside of that integration runtime on that VM or set of VMs that you've installed this little piece of .NET code. And then it stays within your network. All that data that is being read, again, like 128 rows for each table, all that data that's being read, it stays on that VM, and it's only the metadata that is returned to Azure Purview. And so it'll say like, oh, here's all the schema, here's all the columns, here's any classifications if I found them, here's any of that sensitivity, sensitive data that I found. And again, it just returns back the fact that, hey, in columns SSN, I found some sensitive data, but it never returns to Purview the actual sensitive data, right? There's no browse experience within Purview. It's just, yeah, there's some metadata that is getting returned out here. But to answer your question bluntly, it's in Key Vault. That's where all the connection strings would be stored. Does that help?
It does, yeah. I guess I can share that. I know that some clients are concerned about passwords for on-premises resources stored in the cloud, so that would be a concern for them.
Yeah, I guess if we can have a conversation, where else would you put them, right? Like, would you put them in, a text file on-prem so that Purview could pick up? I guess like how else would a service be able to pick up the credential?
It could be stored encrypted in your runtime environment on premises.
When you say encrypted in your runtime environment, it's like encrypted in memory?
No, more like encrypted in some kind of a text format.
Right, but like it would be like still installed, like
it'd have to be on premises somehow, or in some kind of connection to an on premises password manager. I guess those are the only alternatives I could think of.
Yeah. That's where I would. Yeah, that sounds really tough.
Part of the integration runtime.
Yeah, that's what he's saying, but you still have to set it down somewhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct. Yeah, so you would install the integration runtime, and the integration runtime, again, it speaks Azure, right? It knows how to connect to the key vault and extract that information. I would imagine it to be a lot harder to know how to connect to any bespoke password management system on-prem that could be selected, right? With Key Vault, at least it's one common interface. But I totally understand the concern about having those credentials out in the cloud. I would say, if you need any ammunition to fight against that, Key Vault does offer extremely robust auditing. It also offers the ability to like double encrypt, I believe, right? You can bring your own key to encrypt that data, right? So because it's stored encrypted in the cloud, you control who has access to it. You can even be alerted when somebody accesses it, and then finally lay on your own encryption key, and fingers crossed that's enough to get over that objection. Be like, yeah, it's doing the best it can, right? To keep that data safe for you guys as well. But I love that feedback. I will definitely take that feedback because I hadn't heard someone talk about like an on-prem password solution as well. But thank you so much for that.
Is it a separate integration runtime for each server, or is it like a shared service?
That's awesome. Wonderful question. So it would be a shared service, right? You would plop down, in your server farm on-prem and say, this VM plus, I think we limit it to 3. I'm sorry, limit it to 4 virtual machines for some reason. We would say, hey, these 4 VMs, you've installed that particular runtime on all 4 VMs, and you're given like a key to say, this key gives, and this credential gives me permission to talk to this Azure Purview instance, and then great, those 4 can work in unison. And then if you, assuming all 4 VMs have access to those same data sources, they can be used to connect to any of them, right? You can always, if for some reason you want to have multiple like server farms, because this one is in this network and has access to that SQL server, this one's in this network and has access to that DB2 server, you could absolutely do that as well. But generally speaking, most customers have 4 VMs that they are using to connect to broadly most other on-prem data sources. To help?
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Awesome. I love this. This is great. Okay, so that is the registration experience, right? So again, you would register it. You would then create a scan. And let's try actually going into one of these nice ones that have scan information. Okay, this only has one scan. Well, that's not as exciting. But so this scan experience, what it'll tell us, has 2 scans. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so it has two scans, and what this scan experience tells us, just a little bit of information about like, hey, what did I find? Right, it found 79. It's a little bit hard to see. Found 79 assets, meaning for Power BI, it's going to be like the report, the workspace, the dashboard, report, workspace, dashboard. There's probably some other things in there, but for the most part, right, we're looking at these things that it found. If it found any PII information, right, it would tell you right here, I found some PII, right? It would tell you right here that there's something that's been classified. It would then say, okay, so ingestion and so assets are going to be like assets are going to be the report, the dashboard, etc. Relationships are those connections. So within inside of Power BI, we have connections between the dashboard and the report and the workspace, right? The data set and the SQL database that it is pulling from, right? So those are the relationships that you'll see in here. And then it gives you some information on how long it took and stuff like that as well. So that's what we would get from a scanning perspective. And now once that scan is complete, users can start going in and kind of exploring that information, seeing what was happening, what's my lineage of data in this Power BI report workspace. Let's say though you were hesitant to give everyone, say in the marketing org, full access to everything in the accounts payable area, right? Like in terms of access, in terms of seeing the metadata, right? Maybe you don't want the marketers to know that the AP table is called this or what the schema is of that. This kind of crazy branching experience that we have here is a set of collections, and each kind of labeled bucket here, each kind of labeled rectangle represents kind of a logical grouping, and this logical grouping can also filter the results that you see in the search engine, and permissions to access individual files we saw earlier, right? So for example, I could have locked down the accounts payable collection. Let's see if we can even, oh no, that's the wrong button. I can even lock down this accounts payable collection and only let certain people read this information, right? So I can, so in here, rate data readers, I could specify, okay, it's only this one accounts payable Active Directory group, and only they, when viewing Purview, can see these files and see this metadata, right? And again, it's only within Azure Purview for right now, but in the future, there are going to be more policy-based things to allow us to have even greater control over pushing permissions out. But right now, just within Purview. So again, I could lock this down to just the accounts payable people, and my search results and my browse experience as a marketer would be limited. I would not be able to see the accounts payable information. I think, just a personal side, this is both good and bad. Good because you keep potentially sensitive information away from people who shouldn't have it. Bad because now I've kind of limited what my people can find, right? Just thinking, putting my data science hat on, right? If I want to be able to do some analysis, I want to be able to scour my data estate, all of my files, all of my databases, and find the piece of information I care about, right? So as soon as I've locked this down, well, now the data science project I was going to do for accounts payable is going to either A, take a lot longer, or B, turn up 0 results because I can't find the data. No one from accounts payable is talking to me. What are those accountants doing? What the heck, right? So you potentially limit the efficacy of your business users if they can't see the metadata for the majority of things, right? I'm sure there's exceptions to it. I'm sure there's valid reasons for it. As a data person, I want to be able to see all the data and what's available to me, so I can find and solve problems without having to reach out to somebody else that's out there and figure out, like, how do I find even what's available in the accounts payable realm, right? That's an aside. Sorry. But okay, so cool. So we've had this ability to, again, lock things down, to organize things based on these collections, right? And that's what Azure calls the data map. Inside of, again, the data map and these collections, we were able to register data sources. We were able to execute scans. I did not mention that you can also customize the scans too. If you, like, for example, if we're just in the state of Wisconsin, there's a whole slew of, let's just take a look at, okay, blah, blah, blah. Let's do this in mind so I don't break anybody else's stuff. Cancel. Again, if we just care about, like, Wisconsin and we are the US, let's say, then we probably don't need a lot of things that Purview tries to put out there for us. So number one, like if I'm just looking at like a file system in Azure Blob Storage, just a cloud storage for files, I could potentially limit it down to just like specific file types that I care about, that I want to look for. So maybe my most frequent scan, the one that I run all the time, is only looking for Word documents or something like that. I work for a law firm or something, and they're constantly screaming with Word documents, leaking PII. Maybe I want to run that kind of scan every single day, and so I can catch those Word documents with PII a little bit sooner. So let's just assume I want everything. But then again, this kind of is important for those who don't care about the rest of the world. You can limit this information down to just the government bodies that you care about, right? So Microsoft is focused on GDPR here, so we don't care about any of these European countries, blah 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 blah. If we're just focused here in the United States, or our data is only United States focused, so I could deselect all of these, right? I could deselect all of them and just find the US ones that I really care about. Or we were talking earlier before recording about Germany and stuff like that. So maybe I work with Germany as well. And so, okay, those are the values that I really want to care about when I do a scan, when I try to find that PII. I can limit it. Again, there's even more built-in ones, right? Some financial stuff. There's, again, more international ones. Maybe we don't care about those. What I'm trying to get at is we can limit this down, and then we can also provide custom ones. What I like to share the most is this order number. At my first company, Uline, that I worked at, we had a specific order number format, or we had a specific quote number format. And so if I wanted to detect that this column actually represents an order number or a quote number, then I can follow that regular expression pattern, and I can apply it to every single table that I scan to confirm that this column or this this data does not contain a quote number, or it does contain a quote or an order number. And great, I can identify that and say, okay, where's all my quote information? It's wherever this quote number scan result is there. So again, very flexible system is what I'm trying to get at, and you can limit this down to just what you care about when you do some scanning. So let's just say this is great. I'm going to do this scan rule, and so now I've got a scan rule out there that I can say, again, every single day, go do this scan. Every single month, go do this scan. Every single week, do this scan, etc. That is scanning. That is custom classification rules. And I want to switch over to insights, but I'll pause there if anyone has any questions about scanning or the registering data source or anything like that.
One question about like the classification and stuff.
Yeah.
Can it handle like description fields, freeform fields where people might put in PII, things like that?
Yes, I love it. So it is able to do that with some caveats. So like, let's go to a custom classification. Well, let's do a custom classification. So we're just gonna do blah. This is my tenant. Yes, awesome, cool. Just making sure. Blah blah. This is my example classification, and okay, that's gonna go. Okay, that I have a custom classification kind of namespace now, but now I'm gonna create a set of rules for it. And so my name of my classification is going to be blah. Oh, sorry, that's my blah rule. That's my blah rule. I'm just going to give this associate with blah so that whenever I go do my scan, I can say, yeah, use this classification kind of thing. And here's what we have available. A dictionary, which is like hard-coded values, right? The exact match value has to be one of these explicit values. So for your example, this would be terrible. Don't use dictionary in this. But we do have this regular expression option. So in this regular expression one, it has a, you can upload a set of examples. We'll try to figure out the regular expression for you. Or if you feel adventurous, you can try to write the regular expression yourself. And then awesome. So within that, this is the data pattern is, it's got to match the data stored in that field. So if you had, again, some sort of pattern in there that you wanted to match within that description field, awesome, we could do it. And this is where it's kind of like a like search, right? You could make it as simple as, hey, it's got to match one of these characteristics. And then column pattern is about the name of the column. And so I will stress that the name of the column is very important, because that's going to give a strong signal in Azure Purview parlance. I don't know if this is documented, so I will say some of this is use the column pattern. Make sure you are comfortable with that pattern to find the field. Like again, if it's a description field, cool. If it's something more specific or in general, use the column pattern to make sure you have a way to match that column. And then again, data pattern, you can just use like a like search. I will say though that this becomes very important. If it's going to be a description field, you need to be confident that in, let's say, like the first 128 rows, you can match a certain level of this regular expression, where you can match the fact that, if you want to be super confident in 80% of the first 100 rows, it's got to match this particular pattern. It's got to specify this text in there. A lower level will give you potentially false positives, but it might be better for something in your example of the description field where it's going to have a lot of text and it's maybe less likely to see a specific pattern again in those first 100 or so rows of data. But that's where I would approach this, is using this regular expression pattern in the data pattern section to find something like that. Does that help?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you for asking the question. Awesome.
So a follow-up question on that: Are you able to control having it scan more than the first 100, 200 rows or so? Because especially in like a vendor supplied database, there might be some fields that are just sparsely populated, or a column that got introduced 5 versions later. So the first 2 million rows are going to be nulls, right?
Yeah.
And then
how
do you account for that?
We will account for that. So right now, I think the reason why it is not done now is because Azure Purview charges for the time it takes to do that scan. There's a general, you have the system running, you are paying for the benefit of the Purview UI, access to the REST APIs. You can do 10 million calls, as part of just your, it's like 100 million calls as part of your purchase of Azure Purview, of your subscription to Azure Purview. So like you have this thing that's always running, but then the variable cost of Azure Purview is the scan time. And so if you were to have a scan of a 5 terabyte table, like you said, I want to scan everything, and it was 5 terabytes, that scan would take a long time probably, right? To do all these classifications, to butt it up against sensitivity labels in Microsoft Information Protection, it would take a long time. And I think that's why we don't have that feature available immediately. It is on the roadmap. Several other customers have asked exactly what you've asked here. And I think it's important, but it will come at a greater cost, which kind of sucks, because it'll take longer to do that scan, right? But if it's worth it, if it's necessary, then unfortunately the organization would have to accept that additional cost for that scan would take a lot longer to scan such a large amount of data. I love the idea of what you mentioned, where the first n number of rows might be null because it's been in version 5. I think that's actually a really brilliant point, where maybe the scan should actually just do like a query, right? So you can even potentially filter out data. It might go a little bit against the goals of Azure Purview, because it's supposed to be like, just classify everything, but to save yourself money. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that down over here. Thank you for asking that question.
I'll take a credit when that gets implemented.
Yeah, of course. Awesome.
I have a question for you in regards to some other possible data sources and whether or not they'd be applicable to this conversation. What about like a loan origination system, which is basically like SaaS, where you'd have a mixture of fields with customer PII, loan applications, and documents, or like a HR system like Workday, a CRM, or like an email gateway, like a Mimecast or a Proofpoint? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
So 2 out of the 3 you have mentioned have been mentioned in the past. The 2 out of the 3 you've mentioned have serious interest from Microsoft in developing and supporting and building out of the box. For something like the one of those options, and I'm trying to be hedgy here. I apologize, guys, since we're recording and stuff like that. I'm not sure if everyone's under an NDA with Microsoft, but for one of those options, we would end up doing a custom connector. And so you've got me excited because we can talk about that. But ultimately, what we'd have to do is we would have to design a set of types. Let's design kind of a model the way you would look at that data, model the way you would look at the metadata of that thing, of that instance, and then you would end up having something like a connection to your on-prem system, and you would query that on-prem system. You would query that on-prem system and extract out that metadata, and then push it to Azure Purview. So that's what we'd end up having to do. I think we would have to build something bespoke for a non-supported service, unfortunately. But in my opinion, building that doesn't have to be a real struggle. And I'll drop some links and some kind of general notes I share with most customers about this in the chat, because I think you can get started really quickly, and the Atlas APIs make it really tolerable to build that and to produce that. But I'd love, feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat as well. I'd love to talk about how you might build that in a more specific way as well. Does that help?
That does. Thank you.
Awesome. I know we're coming up close on time. I really would be a total jerk if I did not talk about the insights. I made a big deal about the one gentleman who's in security, and I haven't even talked about like the actual insights in here. So let me very rapidly share this, right? So inside of Azure Purview, we talked about the concept of being able to do scans. Those scans apply classifications as well, right? So we can see that, oh yes, there's some sensitive data in here. It talks to Microsoft Information Protection, and we can see, well, let's go 30 days as far back we can go. We can see inside of here, sensitivity labels. Let's see if we got anything here. Yeah, okay. No one's done any scans recently. Okay, so I will go this direction instead. We can see within here, we might be able to say, hey, show me everything that has a government classification on it. And I can get down to the specific ones that are relevant here. Okay, this one has zip codes. All right, so some file in my Data Lake Gen 1, I have an asset that has this zip code in it, right? And I want to find it. I want to figure out what it's all about. So I'm going to click into this total assets number 1, and it's going to take me to essentially the search experience where I can see, oh, okay, it's that healthcare data test.csv. That looks fishy, right? Oh, and this is my instance, right? Oh, that's why it's my instance. We can go back even over here. I apologize. We're going to go back to the insights over here where they're going to have a lot more cool stuff in here. Nice. Here we go. So this is what a more realistic experience might look like. As you're doing scans on a periodic basis, you'll start getting this kind of this visualization. People, help me with the name of this chart. Stacked. It's not a stacked bar chart. It's a stacked area chart. Let's call it a stacked area chart. So this stacked area chart, where I can see over time, how much data is getting classified, how many assets are being classified with sensitivity labels. if we go back over to classifications, we'll see the same exact thing for just generic classifications, right? So again, it could be anything from those government, personal, financial, custom classifications. I can always click into these view details, and I can start, again, probing around and say, okay, of these things that have been classified, where are they? What are they? Gosh, right? Do a little bit of filtering around here. Okay, Australian driver's license numbers. There's a lot of them apparently, right? So I can click around. If I go back into that number 5 that was over here, I can actually see those individual files. And great, now I can go explore, go talk to people. If this is a well-kept data catalog, I might even have some contacts in here, and I can go yell at Chris Fleming, based up in Appleton, and say, Chris, what did you do? Why did you bring this sensitive Australian driver's license numbers up and out into this data lake? You shouldn't have done that. Bad, Chris. And so, great. That would be the kind of the flow. The last thing I'll say is that there's an automated approach for this as well that is coming in terms of being alerted when sensitive data gets hit. But there's also a code approach as well, where you can build a kind of a listener to Azure Purview that says that receives a constant flux of information that says any new thing that gets scanned, modified, or anything that kind of happens inside of Azure Purview from the asset perspective, you can get a message sent to an Azure function, a serverless function, web application that's running, and then that can do some sort of business logic and send out the message to the cavalry and take some action on there. But in principle, in general, more solutions for automation are coming with this insight section, which will make, again, the life of a data governance officer even easier as we improve the insights section as well. So I think I talked over our time. Well, I'm at 7. Yes, I'm going to stop right there, Brigitte. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit, or if there's anything else I can do for you all, just let me know.
Yeah, I have a question. First, I'll say I feel bad for Chris. I mean, who hasn't put Australian driver's license numbers in their database accidentally? It's like, how do you even avoid that?
Right, I don't
know. So you mentioned earlier on impact analysis. So let's say that I'm an application developer, and I'm like the one application developer in the world who's not lazy and actually communicates and tells people when I'm going to do something that's going to break their stuff. Yeah. And I'm going to change a column's name, or I'm going to add a column, or I'm going to do something that might break stuff downstream. Yeah. Where can I look to see what it's going to break so I can tell them?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, so let me give an example. That is going to be, I'm going to give this. This is a silly example, but I have what you would probably see is that this is my dumb example of a range test. I tested how far I could get with the lineage, right? It's pretty far. The answer is it's pretty far. So I might be working on, in this case, I'll just zoom in a little bit. Let's go back here on range test 5 here, switch to asset. So range test 5, that's my table that I'm working on. I, as a developer, am working on. And so what you would end up doing is, okay, I go to my overview, I search for range test 5 in Azure Purview because it's been scanned as an actual asset. I would click on that lineage tab, and I would see hopefully something like this, where I would see, the long lineage, potentially maybe branching lineage of how this is being used, and then I would be able to see that, okay, range test 5 is being used by this, by this proc range test 5, range test 6. Again, pardon the silliness of this example, but this lineage tab is where you would end up seeing it. And if they're using Azure Data Factory, then out of the box, we'll have that column mapping concept, right? Where we could see at the individual column level, I could see that whole entire experience. If you're using something custom, like if we've built these custom types that I have, then it would be up to the application to have made sure that they specified that column mapping to ensure that the lineage was not broken at one of the steps. So there's a potential for a gap in that experience where if you're using a non Azure specific, again, let me rephrase this right. If you are using a custom type as part of your lineage, you potentially risk breaking that lineage from the column mapping level if you don't specify it yourself. That is one of the challenges of the custom stuff, is that you are responsible for building that mapping as well. For the built-in stuff, the Azure Data Factory, Azure Data Share, and I think like Netezza stored procedures, I think they all have column mapping built into it. And as more services come on board, they will also continue to have like that column mapping built into it, so that the out of the box stuff, you will have that flow at the column level. It's just the custom stuff, and some of the early preview ones are not going to have that column mapping built into it. Does that help? Does that share how you might explore Lineage to find where it's going to break down the line?
I think so, yeah. If you click on contacts, does it show all the people who are part of the whole lineage, or just that individual object that you're
that's
initially
a fascinating request. That's actually no. So it would show only the individual asset, right? So if I'm on dataset 5, I would know the experts for my table. If I want to look at the experts for range test 6, I'd have to click into that, and I would have to go and grab that. There's ways programmatically we could do that, but that is such a super interesting idea there of being able to see the experts all along the path. I really like that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do another look over here and write down that, because that's clever.
Right. Yeah. So the clients that I'm working with in Data Catalog, it's all about impact analysis. That's like their main thing.
Yeah. So that's where I think Azure Purview it can supply that, but I will say that as soon as you step out of the built-in box, and even for right now, for example, stored procedures in Azure SQL are not supported, right? So there's no built-in functionality to just scan your stored procedure and then know instantly what columns are being used inside of that stored procedure. It's coming. I really hope it's going to be like a Christmas gift and it'll show up by December, but it's not there yet. So if SQL Server was part of your lineage, which probably is, then we're not going to have that column mapping at that column level, right? We'll have it, of course, as part of the regular lineage, and with some code, you can always create that lineage, create that column mapping, but it doesn't come out of the box yet. Fingers crossed again, it will, and more services that we support will have that out of the box as well.
Do you have it, like, have you seen a preview of it to know how good it will be at tracing SQL? Like, if I have a stored procedure that uses like 15 temp tables and 5 CTEs and aliases at every step, like, can it trace all that, or do you know?
I honestly don't know. It's been a little bit tight-lipped around there, and I'm super excited to see it, because like I keep telling customers, I've been talking about Purview for a long time. I love talking about custom connectors, and I think what the product team is doing for the stored procedure stuff is real computer science, real parsing that code, or working with the SQL Server engine team. It's real heavy stuff. So I have no idea what it's going to look like. All I know, I've seen the UI, but I have not seen the full details of like what level of depth do they support in stored procedures. And I'm hoping, again, we're talking in recording land, so I have strong confidence that the team will deliver something great, and it'll be something that fits the majority of use cases. Maybe an edge case like 15 temp tables and some like 6 CTEs, that might be an edge case. I don't know. I'm not sure. But hopefully we'll see in the next month or two.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anything else I can do to share with you guys? I know we're a little bit over, but I'm happy to share some more.
Could I see that custom mapping? Like, how would you map?
Like,
say there is a stored procedure and you want to map that.
Yes. Well, welcome to the Apache Atlas package. This is some Python code that I had written, which overlays the REST APIs, right? And I think it is one of the easiest ways of getting started with Azure Purview's APIs, because I've tried to make it Pythonic, so make essentially in the normal guise of how a Python developer might think, and then secondly, I've tried to give you as many defaults as possible, because I've worked with a lot of BI folks. I've worked a lot with some just data analysts, and we just want to move stuff quickly, right? So I know the common concepts that we're looking for. To show you what column mapping looks like, I'll make this bigger. What column mapping looks like is essentially a JSON object, that has it's an array because one process, that store procedure, may take in multiple data sets, and it may output potentially multiple data sets as well. So it's going to have an array of individual JSON objects that have a data set and a column mapping key. The data set mapping is going to have a source of some table, right? Of some table, right? The source of the source data set that's coming into the store procedure. And then it's going to have a sink, which is like the target, which is the output of that store procedure. And so that's data set mapping. Column mapping, the column mapping key will take Windows 11. I love it. We're recording. I love it. We have column mapping, which is going to take in an array of source and sink objects, and they are going to be free-form text. So there is no validation at this point for the column mapping. It's saying that you're going to say you'll have like essentially one source sink combination per column that's being used in that mapping, right? So if I have I think what's this example? Okay, so in this example, I'm saying that I have an address that's from the input and it goes to an output just called out01 address. And so that's my mapping. If I have something more complex, like here again, I have the in01 address here and I have in02 postal code down here, that's another table. It's another column mapping data set combination where I have a different source, but it's going to the same output field, the same sink field, and the same sink data set. And so Azure Purview knows how to take this data structure and represent it in that graphical way. And so you would specify, again, as many column mapping, data set mapping combinations as there are inputs and outputs. And then you would, within those, you would specify as many source sinks for the columns as there are columns in that specific combination of source and sink tables. And I will drop a couple links to some YouTube videos that go even more in depth about this. And I'll drop a link to all these samples on Apache Atlas's GitHub page to kind of explore this, right? So once you spin up Purview, you'll be able to kind of run this code as an example and just see it out there inside of your Purview instance as well. But yeah, that's the data structure, and you just kind of append it to the process that's being used at that point. And there's just a couple things there for just when you do an upload, you just have to provide it as part of the payload to Purview. Does that help?
Yeah.
You sound hesitant, but I'll take it. Okay.
No,
so
yeah. No, it's good.
More links will be on the way.
I had one last question, just to be annoying. Like, what happens, like, say someone has a really dirty environment and they have multiple copies of, say, they've got multiple data factories and half of them are junk and they're not actually running. Can you deselect them and just be like, ignore anything with old _old or something like that?
That's really interesting. That's very interesting. So when you say deselect them, is that deselect them from ingesting into Azure Purview, or deselect them when I am searching within Purview? It's already been scanned and you know it's old and dirty and I don't want it. So only search on new and clean and fresh stuff.
I guess it's only in the searching where it matters. Yeah. Like, I don't want it showing up and confusing people.
Yeah. I think that's perfect, and I think that's a great example. So like let's go to do a customer search again, right? What I've right now, the best way I think that you can approach that is by using glossary terms or classifications, because inside of Azure Purview you can I like to use my official gold standard glossary term, right? So I have manually tagged a table with official gold standard, right? And so when I search for customer and I want to look for official gold standard data on the customer, I will, I see it now. It's only filtered down to this. I think in your case, we would do the opposite, right? You would tag potentially anything that is dirty, right? If it's a very small group of things that's dirty and old and I don't want to see it anymore, you might tag it. But you could always switch over to, hey, this is gold. I know that this is good stuff. This is the most important things, kind of like in Power BI where it's got the certified, I think it's a certified little flag or icon or something like that. That's how I would approach it, is through the glossary terms, or again, classifications as well, where you can manually apply a classification saying, this is junk, don't use it or something like that. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
So that's really interesting. I actually had use cases for that where basically I was looking to purge the scanned content out of Purview. And I mean, again, at that time it was still in preview, and it looks like it's still not an option. The one answer I got from Microsoft is just, well, delete the Purview and just create a new Purview account and rescan everything.
Because I've given that answer before, so I apologize if that was me. But honestly, so right now there is a feature that you can delete individual things, right? So like I could go into this table and I can hit this delete button and it would be gone, right? But if you have thousands of things, then you could do it manually. It's possible. There's programmatic ways of doing it as well. I can happy to share some code using Apache Atlas where you could programmatically search for entities, and if you can programmatically determine that this one's a junk, you can execute a delete command right then and there, right? And it'll delete it and remove potentially any child assets along with it, right? Like if you delete a database, it'll delete all the schemas, and all the schemas will then delete all the tables will delete all the columns, and then poof, we've cleared out a whole bunch of stuff. So programmatically is probably the way to go if you're ever in a situation like that, and it's within the thousands. If it's within the millions, you can still do it programmatically, but gosh, I would just still light that Purview instance on fire and like start over. Unless it's a million out of 10 billion things, then talk to me and we'll make sure you get a better experience or something like that, because that'd be very difficult to restart on something with a billion different assets in there or something like that.
What if you rename a bunch of stuff? Like what if you have some process where you need to go through and apply a prefix to all your tables in a certain schema or whatever, and it renames a whole bunch of stuff? Does it know that this was this thing and now it's this thing? So don't keep the old copy, just rename it in Purview?
That's a phenomenal question. Yeah, I love it. So what will happen, assuming there's two sides to that story, right? So number one, I would have to make the assumption that you are doing, let's go in here, the fancier one. I would have to assume that you are doing some sort of scanning, right? You had a periodic scan of, let's say it's a data lake or a SQL server or something like that. If you were scanning on a weekly basis, what would happen is on the next scan, it would pick up that, hey, my original table, right, table A is gone. That's odd. But now I have, prefix table A. Okay, I'm going to index and create prefix table A. Original table A will still exist for some time. It will take probably, if you're scanning on a weekly basis, it might take a week 1, week 2, maybe even week 3, so that Purview is very, very confident that original table A is gone, right? Because we don't want to have a service interruption result in deletion of metadata. Because with the cloud, you should expect things to have intermittent results, and to have intermittent failures. And so we don't want to say, oh, after one disappearance, the thing is gone, because it might be some sort of issue with the underlying data source where it didn't return the result or something like that. Potentially problems with the integration runtime or the VM that's running on, and we don't want to destroy metadata unless we're confident about it. So, but critically, it would never know that you renamed a table. As far as I'm aware, there's no way for it to tell that this table, original table A, has been renamed to prefix table A, and furthermore, potentially any lineage or customizations you've done on original table A would not get mapped over to prefix table A, because it just doesn't know. That would have to be some sort of manual intervention. There are definitely some coding solutions we could come up with. And again, I mentioned like this listener where you could attach to Azure Purview and say, hey, tell me about any of these changes, right? Tell me about any new assets that are coming in. If this were a common thing, we could definitely come up with a solution that says, all right, I see a new table is created. Go do a search and find if this is like a similar name to any of these other tables or something like that. If so, alert, send out a message to the data governance or the expert that's tagged on original table A and ask them to update prefix table A, perhaps, or deny this is not something that I need to worry about. And that might be a one way of going about it. Does that,
so that's like
help?
a custom workflow that you would define.
Correct. Yeah, exactly right. And so I think it'd be also custom code, right? It would workflows, like having something like that built into Purview, I think is a long-term goal, but it's definitely not something built in the near term. But we can definitely code up a solution like that to make it relatively not so painful, assuming it's worth the expense of looking at every single asset that gets created and doing that comparison. And you do enough prefix changes or something like that as well.
You made a statement while you were explaining that. You said you should expect stuff in the cloud to have intermittent failures.
Oh geez, we're still recording, aren't we?
About that?
Oh man, all right. So I think Architecture Center, one of the design principles as part of any cloud provider, they are going to tell you that designing for the cloud, they're going to just tell you something along the lines of expect like throttling, expect outages. For example, I'm just trying to think of off the top of my head of like a SQL server. If you have a long running connection to SQL server, right? On-prem, you might have done that, right? Where it's just like, hey, I'm just going to keep this connection open to my SQL server, and you have no problem doing that because you control your environment. It's your hardware, and the risk of it doing that is low because just the probability of it going is very low. But as in like Netflix kind of people will say, the probability of something happening, once every 1,000 days happens every single day inside of Azure, right? Inside of the cloud, because the scale is so much different. So as a result, whenever you're designing something for a cloud native application, you should be aware that outages may happen and you should have some sort of retry experience, right? A temporary blip might occur while a VM is getting swapped out under the hood inside of Azure, and we will respond back with, hey, service connection dropped as some sort of status code. Your application should be tolerant of that and say, oh, I got that response code. I'm going to go ahead and retry the connection. That's what I was trying to get at right there. And same thing for software that Microsoft writes, right? Where our integration runtimes will handle these sorts of things, but there's always a risk, and Purview wants to be more conservative with deleting metadata, especially if it's been annotated by hand and human people have gone in and improved that metadata as well. Does that help?
I think so. Yeah. So that seems like like a connection failure wouldn't necessarily be something that would tell you that table A no longer exists. But I guess I could imagine situations in which it might get confused when it's halfway done reading something and then it tries to read it again.
Correct. Right. And so, yeah, like if something like that were to happen, a service connection blip happen in the middle of reading a table, right? Potentially you could delete a column, right? Because, maybe it continues to process on, but for that 1 second, it didn't return back one piece of column information. And so I don't want to lose that column. I don't want to lose that column information. And so Purview, it takes, again, it's in the documentation somewhere, it's like 2 or 3 times. If we don't detect it 3 times or 2 or 3 times, then we're confident we're going to cut it, and a delete event will occur. You can always be listening for those delete events and potentially siphon off that data to be sure later on. But that's, again, a coding solution, right? Where you could attach a listener and capture those delete operations and save them off in case you want to be extra conservative about those deletes that are happening automatically on your behalf.
Well, this is Jesus. I have another question.
Please.
This weekend, I started trying to work with this Purview.
Yeah.
To run one scan on one of the databases.
Yeah.
And then it went over and it gave me the assets list. It came to here, but then it says partially completed. It shows the green arrow, but it says it doesn't say like yours that show completed.
Yes.
But it says partially completed. What does it mean?
Yeah. So that there's some possible reason. How long did it run? Do you know off the top of your head how long it ran?
52 minutes.
52 minutes. Okay. So so if I click into, let's see if there's going to be a scan detail here. Okay, that's a bad one. Where was the one that had a scan information here? I just want to see when you click into here and you click in on a specific run ID here.
Yes.
There may be some more information in here. And so that'd be my first ask for you to take a look and say, like, it should give you a reason for why it was partially completed. The only reason I can think of is because of some sort of like, again, blip that occurred, or it was unable to continue processing or something like that, or it didn't have enough permissions to read a certain table or something like that. It could list it, but it couldn't read it or something like that. I would hope that scan exceptions would give you more details in there as well.
Well, I gave the DB data reader permission as it was
Well,
asked.
that should be it. That should be it then. Yeah. Yeah.
And I stored the password in the key vault.
Beautiful.
That was my only part that I was struggling a little. But
the only thing I can think of is there's also, if it was like a SQL Server, or what was the data source?
It is a SQL server. Yes.
So
On-premise.
there's, oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
On-premise.
Okay, on-premise. There might be another role for scanning. No, DB data reader. I was thinking for stored procedures, right? There's like there's another role for that as well, I thought, but I don't think that would be applied.
The view definition.
Maybe yes, but again, we're not scanning stored procedures currently, unless you're in some of the preview that the rest of us want to be in.
It only was doing the select 128. Okay. It spanned like 34 of those at the time for a group of 34 tables at the time, or views. It scans views and tables indistinctly. Yes.
Yeah, I would ask if you had anything in that scan exceptions, because that should hopefully explain why it completed partially. The other side of the coin, though, is you should be able to run another scan, and it should be an incremental scan at that point. Or if you schedule the scan, it will be an incremental scan, and that way it'll pick up from where it left off. Right? If it partially completed, it should be able to detect that I've already hit all of these tables. So now I'm going to go ahead and pick up from where I left off, and any new changes or tables that I have not scanned.
Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, but please, feel free, again, reach out to me if you have any more insights that the scan exceptions. I'd love to hear what's going on there as well.
Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely.